On July 15, 2026, a man who overhauled Ukraine's entire defense procurement system persuaded Elon Musk to cut Starlink access for Russian forces and launched a missile campaign that nearly severed Crimea from the Russian mainland, was shown the door. President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed Mykhailo Fedorov as Ukraine's defense minister as part of the administration's latest government overhaul. The question isn't just why Fedorov is gone. The question is what this reshuffle actually costs Ukraine in the middle of a war it can't afford to lose, and whether the man who got replaced might have been taken down by the very forces he was fighting. Fedorov was dismissed after just 6 months in office. To understand why that matters, you have to understand what he was doing inside that ministry and who was watching him do it. A 35-year-old tech entrepreneur, Fedorov was appointed in January to modernize the military. He came from the world of digital government, not the battlefield. From 2019 to January 2026, Fedorov served as Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation, praised for implementing Ukraine's strategy of a state within a smartphone as part of efforts to minimize bureaucracy. That background wasn't incidental, it was the whole point. He launched an audit of the Defense Ministry and Army brigades that uncovered 300 billion hryvnias, roughly $6.7 billion, in overspending, introduced polygraph testing for employees, and moved part of the ministry's procurement process to open tenders, a step he said cut the cost of 155mm artillery shells by 16%. That's not a bureaucratic footnote. In a war defined by artillery consumption, cutting shell costs by 16% translates directly to rounds on the battlefield. During his 6 months in office, Fedorov radically dismantled corrupt patterns in weapons procurement, shifting drone funding to a system based on verified statistics of their successful combat strikes. He held open tenders for scarce 155mm shells and announced procurement based on actual tactical specifications rather than specific commercial brand names. This eliminated the main corruption risks, but provoked fierce resistance from manufacturers. That last sentence tells you everything. The resistance wasn't coming from enemies outside Ukraine's borders. Shortly after he began his tenure, Fedorov successfully persuaded SpaceX Chief Executive Officer Elon Musk to deny Russia usage of the highly effective Starlink satellite communication system in February 2026. A senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute described the Russian near-total loss of Starlink as truly game-changing, saying the loss was incredibly damaging to both Russian command and control and their ability to operate long-range strike drones. Fedorov also launched something called the Logistics Lockdown campaign on May 27th, targeting Russian logistics vehicles with loitering munitions and medium-range drones. He launched Ukraine's campaign of turning Crimea into an island, a highly effective operation targeting Russian logistics and military sites in Moscow-annexed Crimea and temporarily occupied regions in southern Ukraine. So, this is the man who got fired. Now why? Zelensky justified Fedorov's dismissal by citing a rift between the defense ministry and Ukraine's military leadership. During a faction meeting, the head of state noted that Fedorov and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, had different visions for waging the war, and that there was a systemic conflict between them. But here's where it gets complicated. Both Fedorov and Syrsky had publicly insisted, on the record, that no conflict existed. As recently as June 16th, Fedorov said his relationship with Commander-in-Chief Syrsky was normal and constructive, though the two sometimes had discussions and disagreements over working matters. Syrsky said the same. The public denials held right up until the moment Fedorov was out of a job. The friction between them was framed as centering on Fedorov's proposals to overhaul how the defense ministry operates, a tension reflecting differing approaches between a younger technocrat and more traditional military leadership. One prominent veteran who headed the Public Anti-Corruption Council at the Defense Ministry put it plainly. This is a conflict between a young technocrat and a general from a largely post-Soviet military school. And that framing, reform versus old guard, is where the Vishneve depot explosion enters the story. Vishneve, on Kyiv's western outskirts, came under heavy Russian drone and missile fire during a large-scale overnight attack on the capital on July 6th. An ammunition depot belonging to Ukroboronprom was struck, triggering powerful secondary explosions that killed 7 people and injured 29 others. Zelensky revealed to reporters on July 9th that the facility was an ammunition depot belonging to the Ukrainian defense conglomerate Ukroboronprom, the country's largest weapons manufacturer. The question that immediately followed was obvious. What was an active ammunition depot doing in the middle of a densely populated Kyiv suburb? On July 11th, Zelensky said Ukraine's security service had identified the heads of 2 state-owned enterprises as primarily responsible for violating ammunition storage regulations by operating an ammunition depot in the densely populated Kyiv suburb of Vishneve. Ukraine's largest state-owned defense company, Ukroboronprom, dismissed 2 officials on July 12th, following a preliminary investigation into the deadly explosion. The officials, who headed 2 state-owned enterprises within the defense conglomerate, were dismissed after investigators found violations of Ukrainian law and ammunition storage regulations. The depot scandal sits in the middle of everything Fedorov had been trying to fix. He came in promising accountability, open tenders, and an end to the informal networks that had let defense insiders do whatever they wanted for years. The Vishneve blast made those informal networks visible in the worst possible way: on fire, in a suburb of the capital, with civilians dead. Now consider this. Zelensky didn't just fire the Ukroboronprom officials. 9 days later, he fired the defense minister. The reasons behind the abrupt dismissal stem from conflicts between Fedorov and Ukraine's controversial commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, lawmakers and analysts told the Kyiv Independent. But a second charge was laid alongside the personal clash. Zelensky said that Fedorov and the ministry made procurement decisions at their own discretion, rather than in accordance with requests from the general staff and the military. This concerned in particular the procurement of artillery shells. That's the counter-argument you need to take seriously. Fedorov believed he was cutting corruption. The general staff believed he was cutting them out of decisions that were theirs to make. Both can be partially true at the same time. And in a war, a defense minister and a commander-in-chief who can't agree on how to buy artillery shells is a problem that can't wait. Zelensky said that both should have been dismissed, but that this was not possible. That admission is the clearest signal yet of how deep the problem actually runs. If Zelensky believed the conflict required removing both men, but couldn't remove both, then he made a political calculation, not a military one. He chose to keep his commander-in-chief and sacrifice his reformer. Fedorov is viewed as one of the most trusted political figures in Ukraine, according to recent polling. A Kyiv International Institute of Sociology poll conducted in May found 50% of respondents trust Fedorov, while 21% did not. That's a remarkably high approval rating for a defense minister in the middle of a 3-year war. Firing a popular reformer to resolve a clash with a controversial general is exactly the kind of move that costs a leader political capital. Calls appeared on social media for a peaceful demonstration in Kyiv on Thursday morning to show the president that we are against constant reshuffles in the government and replacing effective ministers with convenient opportunists. The word convenient is doing a lot of work there, because the man now lined up to replace Fedorov is Ihor Klimenko, currently the Interior Minister. Fedorov is expected to be replaced by Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko. Klimenko led the National Police from 2019 until 2023 and was appointed Interior Minister following the death of his predecessor, Denis Monastyrsky. He's a loyal Zelensky ally. He reports directly to the president, and crucially, as one opposition lawmaker framed it, Zelensky chooses Klimenko because he has no ambition to become popular and is not going to combat post-Soviet generals. He is 100% a person who Zelensky needs in this position. That's the bluntest verdict of the entire episode. Fedorov wanted to transform the institution. Klimenko, if confirmed, will manage it. Those are different jobs, and Ukraine needs to decide which one it actually wants filled. Ukraine's parliament is expected to vote on Klimenko's nomination on July 16th. A new cabinet is expected to be announced Thursday, July 16th. Ukrainian media report that Naftogaz chief Serhiy Koretsky is the leading candidate for the prime minister's post. The entire government is being rebuilt in a single week. In his farewell message, Fedorov listed 22 accomplishments his team completed during his tenure, including restricting Russian access to Starlink, instituting draft and military pay reform, and launching the country's anti-ballistics initiatives. The outgoing minister also listed 3 goals he said remained unfinished, including transforming the ministry's structure to North Atlantic Treaty Organization standards and common sense, completing the transition of procurements to tenders, and building a culture of accountability for decisions. Those 3 unfinished goals aren't abstract aspirations. They are the structural vulnerabilities that allowed a depot to sit inside a residential suburb until the night a Russian drone found it. Under his tenure, Fedorov secured dozens of drone deals with international partners and instituted military structure and budget reforms. Supporters of Fedorov argued the change could slow ongoing military efforts. The reforms weren't finished. The corruption networks weren't fully dismantled. And now the man driving that work is gone, replaced by someone chosen, by all accounts, precisely because he won't make the old guard uncomfortable. This is not a small reshuffle. It is a decision about what kind of war machine Ukraine is going to build, heading into what could be the most consequential period of the conflict. What do you think? Does removing Fedorov strengthen Ukraine's command structure? Or does it set back the very reforms that were starting to change the battlefield? And if Zelensky believed both Fedorov and Syrskyi should be replaced, why was it the reformer who paid the price? Tell me in the comments, and if you want the next development in this story the moment it breaks, subscribe.